Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. Dave Emmons and the Strange Reality. And this is my second show this year. I took a holiday break for about 2 weeks and probably 1 into 3 weeks. And I did a show the other night, but I got to get that one out. We had to do some editing of that one. But I'm glad that the followers, are sticking with me, especially on Facebook, and I'm building my YouTube crowd. And I really want to build the YouTube crowd, a crowd for, for views if you go over to that channel or even Rumble. I'm on 10 different platforms, but a lot of times you get buried into the deep platform titles and topics that you don't get a chance to be seen. If people know about the internet, they know that for a fact. Or people who started podcasts and then had to stop because they were grinding, but they weren't getting anywhere. And I'm grinding, but my numbers are slowly coming up there, and it's thanks to a lot of the followers. I have a guest today from the UK, and I have some UK buddies. I was just telling this gentleman. He's an award-winning satirical sci-fi author. Stephen Ford returns with two provocative new novels: No Free Speech for Hate and Destiny of a Free Spirit. I'm going to have to turn the light on for this, Steve. I get my studio lights are a little dark, but this gets a glare. But at least I can read the print. I'm sorry, everybody out there, but the spirit books, but that confront the most urgent debates of our time: free speech, AI, nuclear conflict, prejudice, and the survival of self-destructive humanity. That rings a bell all over the place. Praised by the publishers Weekly Book Life as a searing examination of extremism, and by Kirkus Review for its provocative questioning about AI and society. Ford's work channels the spirit or of Orwell, and that's back in the day, 40s, I believe, or whatever. Maybe Stephen can shine a light on that, on Orwell and Huxley, while carrying out a voice entirely on his own. He said his stories entertain, but their deeper purpose to the challenge how we think and how we feel about freedom, safety, and truth. And also, fiction collides with real world other names, dilemmas, putting pushing readers to examine their assumptions. It's the light. I should have just taken care of that, Stephen. When you get older, you need more light. Stephen Ford, after retiring from 4 decades career in information technology, has had 5 books published, some of which have won awards and received official acclaim. He writes about issues of importance, including free speech, nuclear war, and artificial intelligence. We talked about that. Though his work was based in the UK, he often had international assignments, including parts of Europe, Asia, and America. He handled projects in many industries, including retail, manufacturing, insurance, banking, commodity trading, pensions, and nuclear power stations, and the security systems. Now, Stephen Ford, you've been around, it sounds like. And what were you doing with all these businesses that you were working with? Stephen Ford, thank you for coming on the show. Actually, too, could you explain to us a little bit about your background and what I didn't see with very little light? So,
Okay, what you didn't mention is that uh, I spent most of my childhood in Africa and the Middle East
right.
because my father was a geologist, and we were out in remote places. I think that has influenced me to a very great extent, particularly in having both an international outlook. I don't see myself as being hidebound as a British person. I feel myself as an international citizen, and also feel that for me, what I feel most at home in is the wildness, the wild environments, the
Right.
forests, mountains, um, rivers, that sort of thing. And to me, cities, plantation agriculture, and things like that are kind of like an intrusion. Whereas for most people, that's their main life, and the wild world is something outside. So I think I have a slightly different perspective than many would have from that
Well,
point of view.
Yeah, it sounds like it. You were telling me my forte a lot of times is in science and also UFOs and ETs because a lot of that background. I've written a couple of books about that, and I'm writing. I'm starting on my fifth book, and we were just talking about how difficult it is to write. But number one, but number two, the worst thing is marketing. So that's where I found my problem. But you talked about that your first couple of books you covered like paranormal topics and also the triangle. Could you tell me a little bit about those, Stephen, just briefly, and then we'll get into the meat of the talking points.
Yeah, I think what a lot of writers do is they write on over and over on the same theme. They might write a series of books, or they find a formula that they're comfortable for them, and then they just write that formula. Actually, every one of my five books is different. I've what I like to do is to explore a different subject, a different idea in
Mm-hmm.
each book. So I've got five books out that are really quite a diverse range of subject matter and ideas. Um, and I mentioned to you earlier that there's a couple of books which you haven't mentioned that might tie in more to the paranormal
Mm-hmm.
and that side of things, compared with the Destiny of a Free Spirit and Walking Out of This World, which
Right.
again have their own perspective as well. So to give a kind of flavour, I'll just take you through the
Sure.
five books that I've written,
Yeah.
just a very quick brief,
Yeah.
so you know what they are. Destiny of the Free Spirit is my first book that I wrote, and that's a futuristic novel set after a nuclear war. But it's not really about the nuclear war; it's about the aftermath. It's about the new world that's established after that event. Um, and it's there's a mysterious um, organization called the Commission that essentially governs the world in this
Yes.
new reality,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a mystery exactly what or who the Commission is. Um, we still have nations of the world, but the Commission governs the interaction between the nations, and the nations don't have armed forces, or the armed forces are sort of ceremonial armed forces, should we say,
Right.
because in order to protect the world from what's happened in the past, the Commission has been given powers to prevent new wars and also to uh, manage the environment, because the environment has been substantially destroyed by a combination of the industrial processes that we currently have,
Mm-hmm.
um, and um, and the war itself, the nuclear war itself, has contaminated a lot of the planet. So one of the missions of the Commission and all the nations of the world have sort of gathered together to give it these powers. They have set it up so that the Commission basically straightens things out. Um, so uh, what the Commission has done is divided the world up into two realms, which I've called ecologia and economica. And ecologia is the wild world, and that is a world, a nature reserve essentially. It's been repopulated by extinct animals like mammoths and saber cats and so on that human activity has previously eliminated. So it's kind of recreated the Pleistocene world. The people in there are Stone Age, and they are banned from any technology, so they have to live a Stone Age existence. So there's a small number of people living a Stone Age existence alongside all the wild animals, and they're really just part of the wild landscape. That's ecologia. Economica is like the modern world with knobs on it. Everything's automated, robots run everything. Everything that anybody ever needs is provided for them automatically. They don't have to do anything. So what people do there is they live a hedonistic lifestyle. They're still competitive in the sense that people want to get on, but wealth is measured in terms of pleasurable things you can do, like experiences and theme parks and status symbols and that sort of thing.
Right.
So nobody starves, but those who have just the basics, that really just have the basics, they live in like a glorified container, shipping container, and that's their home,
Hmm.
all stacked up,
Yeah.
um, adequate for their needs. They get fed, but if they want to get more than that, they have to work. So it's not that it's not we hasn't changed the economic system to that degree, except that the world's moved on. Um, Now, the Commission doesn't allow anybody to move between the two worlds, the ecologia and economica. They're kept strictly separated. And the hero of the book has found a portal between the two. And uh, that's illegal. He's not supposed to do that. But he set himself up as with an existence in both of the realms. And the end of the book is when he has to choose which realm he's going to settle in, because the portal is about to be closed, and you don't know until the end of the book which one he chooses, and I won't tell you at this
Okay,
point.
that's good. Yeah,
Um,
keep us hanging on that. But there's been
yeah,
several movies and TV series based on The Last of Us. The last people remaining over from some kind of either an alien attack or a nuclear attack, something like that. But what you're describing, this guy can go back and forth through a portal. Now, is he going to different dimensions? Are these two Earths,
no,
Stephen?
it's very simple. There's like a huge fence,
Uh-huh.
literally a fence between the ecologia, the nature reserves, and the economica world.
Hmm.
Um, and he finds ancient mine workings with a mine shaft and mining tunnels, which go back to the ancient Roman times. So they're not documented anywhere.
Okay.
And he can just move between the two through these mine tunnels.
Have you ever had any of these books, these two books you're talking about? Have you ever had them presented in a way for a movie script? Have you ever thought of that? Because there's a lot of
Well,
movies that talk about this, Stephen. Yeah,
that would be nice. I think it would make quite a good movie.
yeah.
Um, um, Nobody's approached me yet to do that, but I'm open to offers. Anyway, that's my very first book. We'll talk about that a bit more in a moment. My second book that I did was one I called Walking Out of This World. And that is brings in the supernatural. So this is one of the things I do. I like hiking and trekking. That's my thing. And I'm actually the local chairman of our regional branch of the Long Distance Walkers Association, which
Wow.
is a British. We don't get out of bed to walk less than 20 miles,
Yeah.
and our big event is walking 100 miles all in one go. So we're quite hardcore trekkers, and that's over rough terrain. Um, so I feature somebody who might have some similarity to me, who's one of the main characters in this book, who's leading a walk for his local hiking group, um, and a strange new member turns up into his group. We're allowed to do that when we have walks. People could just turn up, and this new person turns up. We've not seen him before, and he's slightly unusual, and he knows things about people. Um, and uh, when he talks to people, they're sort of slightly uneasy because he's kind of, how did he know that kind of thing? Um, and it's terrible weather. This is in around October. It's raining. It's mist and fog and terrible conditions. And the walk leaders decided they're going to have their lunch break in a clearing in the forest, and they're sitting on wet logs in the pouring rain. And this new guy says, "Well, why don't we go to this local pub that I know just around the corner? It's only 10 minutes away. We could go in there and be dry and warm, and I know the landlord. He'll feed us and everything else." And he persuades the group, overriding the walk leader, to come to this. They go to this place. It's not on any map. Nobody
Mm.
knows about it, and they suddenly appear, and it's an unnerving place because it's a throwback to an earlier time. To the time when the people were young, and the people there, they meet people who they knew when they were young, um, and they're going back over what might have been, relationships which might have been and didn't happen, and regrets, and it's a chance to kind of relive things, and they want to, having been there, they want to get back there, and so the various characters will get back to this place where they're sort of reliving an old life. And then there's another character turns up, and I've called her Lucifix,
Lucy.
and she is she's like the devil, hence the name.
Mm-hmm.
And she's everyone's worst nightmares, but she entices people to another world, which I've called the underside, which is the worst of modern technology, all gone wrong. It's brutal. People work in the mines, overworked, exploited, crushed, and everyone's worst nightmares come to fruition in this world. And so it builds up to a fight between the two spirits: the spirit who's taken them to the sort of the world where the might have been world, and the underside. And there's a battle royal between the spirits to determine who where these people are going to end up, and they get rescued by the good spirit.
And yeah, so yeah, those books sound like they're very creative. You're getting some creative juices going in some of that. You're adding another dimension, like one person and then another person is evil, and that would make for a good, sci-fi movie plot, or something that a script would probably work well with. You ought to get some promos on those books and try to put them out there to movie scripts, because a lot of things like that, like I said, a lot of the shows, and I sometimes I see them, and the one looks like the other, but what you're describing is just a little change in your direction of what you're taking these two books, and that would make a good refreshing change for TV and also movies. Just a suggestion, just do a promo on those, and find somebody to do that. But let's get to your other books, and we're going to be talking about. And I know your public relations person sent me the talking points for corruption, uh, the nature of official corruption in society. You might want to start with that, what I got here, and also mention the book that you have written this topic in, Stephen.
Yeah, that one is corruption is maybe not quite the right word. I think what I was mainly getting at in that book, which is No Free Speech for Hate, is the polarization we're seeing in politics these days.
Yes.
So that's my most political book. I do weave in a few political thoughts in all of my books here and there, but they're kind of woven into the texture of the thing. They're not kind of the main subject matter. But in No Free Speech for Hate, what I'm doing is I'm bringing it's political, totally political. I'll be completely upfront with that. But I'm not taking sides on the politics. What I'm doing is I'm kind of taking a step back and looking at it from the outside, and hopefully putting up a mirror that people won't people are reluctant to look in, so people can see themselves. So the two extremes which I'm highlighting are very much similar to what we're seeing all over the world, in fact, in the USA and in Europe, which is a liberal left, which has gone to some extremes, right, which I'll talk about in a moment, and then a reaction to that, the other extreme, which is a sort of populist right, that is almost a rejection of this sort of liberal left ideas that have been, if you like, sort of forced down people's throats. The book is really about that rivalry. So the world I'm painting is set in England. It's little time in the future. I'm postulating, whether this would actually happen, I don't know, but I'm postulating a political setup that is governed by the liberal left. So there's a liberal socialist party that's in power, and it's been put there by the universities. So essentially, there's this creed, if you like, this almost religious creed that we're seeing coming out of the universities, that a woke culture, if you like, another way of putting it, where you have gender politics, you have grievance politics, you have all the sort of supposed oppressed groups having to be given special treatment. You're very constrained in what you can say. And they claim to be liberal, but they claim to be against hate, and yet they are not liberal at all, because they're intolerant. If you have to subscribe to their creed, or else they don't tolerate you.
Yeah, Stephen, you are talking about something that's going on right now, and that book is actually saying what is going on now, because the liberals, that party has changed. It's went to socialism, of course, and it's kind of confusing. I used to vote on both sides. It didn't matter, politics, whatever. It was the person. But the thing of it is, what you're talking about is worldwide. Maybe not in Russia or China, because they've already got an established communist regime, dictatorship, and also in Asia, they're pretty well covered there. But we have problems in Australia, Canada, and Europe that are changing politics. And Italy stood up, and they're changing everything there. So I think I see Europe and Canada and Australia and our country even going through growing pains. I mean, it's not fun to not be able to, both parties, to talk and make agreements and get the countries running properly,
Yeah,
and doing the right thing for the people. Stephen, yeah,
well,
go
I
ahead.
think one of the points I make in my book is they can't talk to each other,
Yeah.
because they talk a completely different language.
Hmm.
There is no sort of crossing the aisle or that kind of thing, because you can't have a reasonable conversation
No.
between the two extremes. So what's happened in my story? The main character is a professor in a university, and he's a professor of pharmacology, but he's also a psychiatrist originally, and he still practices on that. And so he tries to steer a middle course and try not to get involved in politics, but politics finds him inevitably. He has a wife who is what they call a TERF, a trans exclusionary radical feminist. So because she's a TERF, she's a persona non grata, and she's been banished from the university environment, and is now put in what is effectively a gulag for people who don't think right. And he has to separate himself publicly from her, otherwise he's finished. And he has an affair with another person from academia in order, as cover for the fact that he's still talking to his wife, but he has to meet in secret. I'm covering all sorts of things: the cancel culture, the persecution of people who deviate from the established creed, as sort of heretics, if you like. I draw parallels with the Spanish Inquisition, that kind of thing. Where if you don't toe the line with their particular creed,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
is
Stephen.
like a
Stephen, I got to make this disclaimer for Facebook and YouTube and the rest of the platforms. Well, a couple of them are concerned about this, but these are books. These ideas coming from the books that you wrote, and that's coming from your opinion and your research. So I must say this is for entertainment purposes only, and not to get involved in stepping aside politics. So we're just talking about your ideas and your books, and it's for entertainment purposes and for book reading purposes. And Stephen, you're dead on, but let's continue on, buddy.
Okay, yeah. Well, it is, of course, completely fiction. It's England, a hypothetical England. Um, but what I'm doing is I'm sort of trying to. I think the people who read it should be able to see themselves or see their own society, or where how it might go um, in the book. Um, and I think what we've seen is the universities have expanded their remit because practically everything is a graduate profession now. So you can't.
Hmm.
So anybody who a lot of jobs that people used to be able to do just for learn on the job or as apprentices, they can't do that now. It has to be graduate, and they've made everything in my book. Everything's a graduate from refuse collection to
Hmm.
you name it. It's a graduate profession. So what this means is the people who are excluded from education, and they're basically anyone who doesn't abide by the political creed. So if you say things which are politically incorrect about whatever it might be, then you're cut off from education, which means you're cut off from any professional job, which means you're in this underclass that's outside of society. And in the book, there's a leader emerges who organizes these people from outside, uh, if you like, the established quotes right thinking society. And there's a revolution essentially, and the liberal left organization is overthrown. The universities are ransacked, and a new
Hmm.
kind of the new lot come in and break everything apart. Um, so, which of course is highly destructive. Um, but it's engendered by the resentment that's been brought in by this kind of new creed being forced on everybody, which I think has a lot of parallels to what we're seeing in many countries at the moment in politics.
Yes, I know. In Oxford, in England, and Harvard, in the U.S., and other colleges are teaching this. This they call it Democrat type liberal, uh, I guess, information or history. They're rewriting some of the history, canceling certain things. Now, I know, and I think I'm pretty sure you know after your first couple books that history is not what we think it was. It's not. It's totally wrong. They've been the elites or the people in charge, like you were talking about a while ago. They're keeping a lot of this knowledge away from us, and we've been in that span of elite control for thousands of years. You're talking about kings and queens and actually ETs running things back some 60,000 years ago, whatever. But yeah, it's getting to be where you, like you said, you go to college, you're not going to rank or rate unless you follow those types of ideology and then go on. Uh, Stephen, go ahead. I just wanted to intertwine what you're talking about.
Yeah, so that's no free speech for hate. Um, so what I'm doing, I think all the instances which I bring into the book, there are probably real life things which have happened. I base it all on real life.
Hmm.
So none of the things which I've written about are things I made up. They all exist. If you look
Yes.
out there, I've just made them a little bit more extreme, if you like, or ramped
E-
up the volume a bit to
Embellished. Yeah.
yeah.
Embellished.
But the but if you read it, you would think, oh yeah, that actually happened. So uh, so I think that's fairly topical, and I say right up front, highly political. I'm not taking sides as to who's right between the liberal left and the populist, revolutionaries who overthrow them, because I'm not putting either of them in a particularly good light.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is this is what this situation has created, um, and uh, the voice of reason, if you like, is excuse me, my main character, the professor, who's trying to say, hang on, I want to just live a normal life, um, you know, uh, have a decent life with my family and everybody. I don't need all this stuff. But unfortunately, the stuff gets him, and
Yeah.
drags him along. So that's what that one's about. The the other book that I think is the one I had the most fun with is called the Glastonbury Triangle. And I don't know if you're familiar with Glastonbury, as a place in England, but it's the people think it's on ley lines. It's got a lot of Arthurian legend in it. Um, it's a lot of history, but it's become a sort of center for people who are into alternative lifestyles, hippies, people who are into crystals and
Hmm.
ashrams and different religions, paganism, that sort of thing. So that's where Glastonbury is today. And the book is something I had real fun with because it's a great place, Glastonbury. It's got all this fun stuff going on,
Hmm.
and so I thought, yeah, I'll have some real fun with this book. Um, so the basic plot is there's a journalist, and he's interviewing a marquis who runs an Arthurian theme park, and there are people disappearing. That's why I've called it the Glastonbury Triangle, because it's about people disappearing.
Really?
Um,
Oh.
and there's a mad scientist who is employed by the Marquis to create mythical creatures or recreate mythical creatures for his new theme park, which is a theme park of the ancient classical world and their legends. So there's all the legendary beasts that you get in Greek legends, like satyrs, centaurs, those kind of things. And uh, the journalist gets sucked into a cult that his girlfriend has gone into, and she's disappeared. She's one of the disappeared people, so he's on her trail, and he follows the trail, and and then eventually it leads to what the mad scientist is doing, and it ends with him being just in time to prevent her being converted into a mermaid to populate this new theme park.
Uh,
So so I had a bit of fun.
yeah. Being creative, being fun. Yeah, that's great. But what now? We talk about ideology, and what you were saying is something we went through in the '60s here in America. We call them the flower people or the hippies, whatever. And they were in San Francisco, free love and all this other stuff. I guess you can say that's kind of a liberal idea or ideology. The hippies, where they wanted just free love, and I guess they didn't want to work. I don't know if that's the case, but the people that you say goes to Glastonbury, they is that part of what they do? They don't work. They're hippies and they just live off the land or whatever. Stephen.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. Yeah, I think they are the ancestors of, oh, sorry, the descendants of the '60s hippies, a
Yeah,
continuation of the '60s hippies, but
yeah,
it still exists in Glastonbury.
yeah. I wanted to get to why do good people change and become corrupt? It's all about the money, isn't it, Stephen?
Um, yeah, I'm not sure. I think it probably I think it's something to do with peer pressure as well. It's about everybody else is doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's a feeling that uh, if I'm going to get on, if I'm going to succeed, I have to cheat a little. And then once you start going on the line of cheating and getting away with it, you'll do more and more of that, and you'll influence others to go along with your schemes, and the whole thing will snowball.
Mm-hmm.
So, and as part of it is, of course, a loss of moral compass as well. You have to have, at some point, you have to have thrown away your conscience to go to take that path.
Yeah, I think money, like you were saying, the deep state a while ago. I think there's billionaires who actually support a lot of these I guess back and forth ideology conflicts, and they're supporting a lot of that, and we've been finding that out more too. The elites, the deep state or whatever. Uh, okay, I go down these talking points. What we're talking, and using the police as an example. why do otherwise good people join and join in help society, and then they become corrupt. We were talking about that now. I think it's probably due to the money. We've been tracing the money. Like follow the money, and you'll find all the corruption that you need to find. Is that somewhat of what your beliefs are, Stephen? It's a money thing, basically.
You may well be right. I'm not really writing about that. Um, I think I think where in my books that would occur. Um, I think in Destiny of a Free Spirit, money is still very important in
Hmm.
the economical world, um, because what I'm doing, I'm just trying to highlight that nothing changed really in terms of human nature, even
Yeah.
though you've now got the commission running everything, preventing the world being destroyed. You don't have to work in order to live because you'll be fed. Uh, uh, so uh, and yet society carries on despite that in more or less the same way. So I think that's probably true, and I think that there's rivalry um, uh, in that society, and I do allude there to a certain amount of uh, yeah, people doing favors for each other and that kind of thing. Um, but I think what I'm doing is I'm just saying this is how the world is today, and I don't see it changing
Yeah.
fundamentally. Um, so I'm not trying to say, oh, these people are wicked people or anything like that. I'm just sort of saying is this is what how people are in general. um, I think in um, there's another book I haven't mentioned yet, which is To Keep Us All Safe, which is about a pandemic. This is a disease that a fictional one that I've made up, which I've called chimopox. So it's maybe a little more serious than COVID one we actually went through. So I wanted to have. I don't think COVID was as deadly as people make out. Um, Whereas in my book, chimopox is rather more serious, but it's the same sort of thing. And I portray a society where there's lockdowns and controls are imposed, and people are making money from making vaccines, and there's people that are anti-vaccine and all that sort of thing. So I'm bringing out all that into that book. Um, uh, and one of the main characters there is a billionaire who creates who does a lot of these things, and he's got fingers in lots of different pies.
Yeah.
So I do kind of talk about how that side of society works
Yeah,
in that
I was
book.
mentioning, you mentioned deep state. I mentioned the elitism that control us from the money. There's 13 different families, or even the Vatican. The king and queen of England are involved in this big circle of, I guess, a deep state, that they control things, and also these pandemics that you're talking about. We've been researching that or investigating that pandemic from 2019, 2020, and they're investigating that to find out, why it happened, and who might have promoted it or even paid for it. And I can't get into details because nobody's been confirmed or nothing's been really proven, where this all comes from. But uh, the pandemics have. Do you think they all have a human start, or are they just a natural virus, Stephen, that occurs?
Well, I think in terms of I think in my book, which is the fictional virus, the chimopox, I don't go into how it arose. I've just taken it as kind of like a natural thing that happens from time to time. You get plagues, you know,
Hmm.
not sure why. So I'm not going into sort of if you like a conspiracy about how the virus occurred. I'm going more into um, the society's reaction to it and the sort of authoritarian tendencies people have for stopping anybody moving and wearing masks and all kinds of regulations that people love to impose when they get a chance, and the people who resist it. So I'm sort of I'm bringing that out. I think in terms of of COVID itself, I would say we don't know, because it could be it seems to have originated in China.
Yeah.
We kind of
Hmm.
know that, but was it a Chinese lab, or was it something else? Was it just a something that came from a Chinese market? They like eating exotic animals, and
Yeah.
they have a lot of those in their market. So maybe it came from that.
Yeah.
So I don't have an opinion as to which one of those it is. Although I think although it was everyone was shut down and trampled all over as conspiracy theorists when they suggested it might have come out of the lab. Um, I think it's now emerging that actually coming out of a lab is quite a credible explanation. I'm not saying it's the right one, but I certainly wouldn't rule it out.
Right.
So was it intentionally created in the lab, or was it an accident in the lab? I think I'm of the view of the cock-up theory. I don't think people are that clever to come up with fiendish schemes. I tend to think that most things happen because people mess up. So I think if it came out of a lab, it was probably
Accidental.
accidental mess up in the lab.
Yeah,
But that
that's
was
one of,
just my pure
yeah,
guess.
that was a theory, yes. Now, speaking about other countries and what they talk about and talked about the truth, you have a point here. It says the notion of transparency in a democratic societies really a myth and a utopian idea, not based on any reality. We have a present administration who actually flaunts the idea of transparency. They are very transparent. I mean, every day, our president's giving speeches or talking to the press all the time, where we've had other presidents not available as we do now. I'm not, siding with, but that is one common sense side of things that I'm seeing myself, that this administration talks about a lot of stuff, but I don't trust a lot of what's going on. I really don't. Even if they say this or that, that they're going to do this and that, well, politicians are known to embellish things like we were talking about a while ago. So I really think that there's not a total transparency, and there's no disclosure on UFOs, and we've been working on that for some time with a congressional committee working on it, and we're not getting the transparency that we want, and that's one of your points that you made, Stephen, about transparency. Could you elaborate on that, probably?
Yeah. Um, I think one of the issues is that people talk different languages. People get into a mindset, and I'm seeing that increasingly echo chambers in our society, so that people talk within their own echo chamber using their own language, their own frames of reference, their
Mm-hmm.
own assumptions about things, and because they don't stray outside, or tend not to stray outside those echo chambers, they don't get to hear what the other lot are saying, what other people are saying, and if they do, they dismiss it as heresy, it's conspiracy theories, it's all wrong, these are terrible people, blah blah
Mm-hmm.
blah. And they don't we don't see meaningful debate or meaningful discussion which could get us to some sort of truth. So I think what society's done is become granulated and fragmented into these little enclaves of thinking, and we can't communicate with each other. So what does that mean about transparency? Well, they probably think they are transparent. Each of these groups thinks they are transparent because they say what they think freely in their own language. The only problem is it's not a language the other people understand or will accept.
Yeah.
So there's no common ground that we achieve here.
Yeah, like we're going back to the Tower of Babel. That's basically,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's almost like talking different languages. They might
yeah,
all be talking English, but it's not the same English.
And also, I think the governments, there are certain things that they hold close to their vest. They don't tell people because those are secrets I think they keep from us, and they won't talk about that. So I I myself don't believe in total transparency because I don't think any administration has had total transparency. There's a lot of things they keep away from us, a lot of secrets, operations that's going on, things of that nature. They don't tell us what a lot of different departments in the government are doing. You know, they got some of them's got free, free run of things, and they can do what they want, like CIA, FBI, whatever. But they're trying to get a control on that. Uh, and also, I guess to follow up, I think I'm getting into conspiracies. And are there conspiracies of silence around corruption, Stephen?
I think undoubtedly, obviously, anybody who's involved and connected with people might be implicated will not want these things exposed, and they all have friends, and if they are the establishment, then clearly there's going to be a conspiracy of silence there.
Mm-hmm.
If they're benefiting and they owe their position to whatever practices they have, and they'll dress it up and they'll pretend that it's not corrupt, or they'll justify it in some
Yeah,
way
there
in
is.
order to,
Yeah,
it may
that's
be just to fooling themselves as much
right.
as anybody else. Um, but it's pushing their own self-interest, and yeah, so it takes an outsider to come along and say, hey, wait a minute, this isn't right. um, but such people who do that are rocking the boat and threatening these people's positions, so they'll probably get stamped on and silenced. They're not careful.
Well, there's a saying that's going around now that about 80% of the conspiracies that we've been hearing the last 30, 40 years have all come true, and that they're not conspiracies. There's just a very few of them that are kind of like, I guess, over the top uh, conspiracies that are don't they're not really true. People are making them up in order to be politically correct or whatever. But a lot of conspiracies that they talk about, it's just like the moon landing and bases on the moon and bases on Mars. We have Space Force here, and actually, those have been proven that there could be a possibility that we have a secret space force that's way ahead of NASA and other space agencies, like in UK and everything. So there are conspiracies out there that's still hanging that haven't been proven, but there's a lot of them I've seen in my lifetime, and I'm older, and I've seen a lot of these conspiracies come out, like John F. Kennedy assassination. They've talked about that now, the UFO disclosure conspiracy, and while I'm going into that, I guess what I'm heading towards, Stephen, is if it weren't for whistleblowers, and we have whistleblowers on the UFO disclosure now, and we got whistleblowers now on corruption, and we will never know anything about what really goes on in government agencies. Shouldn't we have more protection for whistleblowers? Here in our country, we do have some sort of protection that we try to protect them, but they're usually threatened or somebody's against what they're saying. What do you feel about that, Stephen? In your books, you wrote something about that.
Okay, well, I think in No Free Speech for Hate,
Yeah.
anybody who deviates from the standard political line is a heretic, and has to be shouted down and um, thrown out, exiled from polite society. So they basically, uh, there's a conspiracy there to shut down any dissent, um, and that will shut down dissent of all kinds. It'll shut down whistleblowers as well as anybody else. So there's a sort of like a almost enforced conformity that I'm describing. Um, so I think that is certainly doesn't help whistleblowers, because they're always going to be seen as outsiders
Hmm.
by the establishment. And if you've got a culture that says we shut down people who dissent, then you've got a problem.
Yeah.
Um, and I think it's not so much a legal thing, um, because I think it's a cultural thing. I think people who have this culture sort of forced on them, if you like, it's sort of drummed into them in their college days, and then they take that through their whole careers. So what we've done is we've had a university environment that has indoctrinated successive generations of anybody who's educated and in positions of authority. So your whole upper part of society is now includes these people who've been through that process. So if you get, they won't all have been 100% reliably indoctrinated. So there will be some dissenters,
right.
the idea is that in my book, the indoctrination has become more extreme than it has been up till now. And so now, literally you've got all these sort of clones of people who've all been sort of drilled into this way of thinking, and society can't adapt. It can't tolerate anyone who doesn't sort of fall into that mold. So it's conformity, I think, conformity around a political, in this case, idea, could be religious, and an intolerance of anyone who deviates from it. So that's probably my main driver, rather than people kind of enriching themselves or improving their position by dubious practices. But perhaps I should write a book about that. I haven't yet. That hasn't been my main topic, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking about, and some of the talking points is something that I'm moving into each one of them into a different topic or something. But you talk about people, is a little corruption okay? I think you mentioned that in your book. Are we talking about white lies? I would lie to save somebody's life. I would.
Yeah.
I would. That's about the bottom line for me. But what do you think about that, Stephen? Is it okay for people to be a little corrupt, maybe to save their lives or save their families' lives?
Well, in terms of white lies, yeah, I agree with you. I think one has to be careful what one says, because you can do a lot of damage
Yeah.
By saying. I think just because something is true doesn't mean to say you should shout it all the time, or you should be diplomatic in how
Right.
you put it. I think I would say that, and sometimes it's better just to not say it, because of the implications of that, and untruths. Well, should we say untruths? Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, there are occasions when it probably is morally right, actually, to say something that isn't true. It's a complex. The morality of this is complex. It's
Right.
not. I think it's very simplistic to say, "Oh, the truth must win all the time, and we've got to shout the truth from the rooftops all the time,"
Right.
because yeah, I think you can cause a lot of conflict and a lot of problems that way. So
Yeah.
we have to be a little bit careful.
Yeah. When I was in the military, in combat, they used to teach us soldiers that you can lie to the enemy, but don't lie to your commanding officers. That was one of the
Yeah.
things that we've always were taught. And so, yeah, when you get an enemy, or if you get captured, you really don't want to tell them, pertinent things because it could affect, your movement, your other buddies and your other soldiers. But you can give them misinformation or disinformation, and confuse them a little bit for that. So I agree, is to a certain extent that when I think, but do you call lies corruption, Stephen?
So what's the definition of corruption? I think it's corruption is dishonestly profiting from something. I would put it that way. Um, so if you um, achieve some advantage for yourself, whether it's financial or in terms of gaining a position or something of that nature, um, using something that is not legitimate, which you really shouldn't morally do,
Right.
legally or morally do. So I would say that's what corruption is. It's not. It may involve lying, but it doesn't have to involve lying.
Yeah. I one of the we're getting to this point here. Society turning a blind eye to corruption. We see that here. I don't know if you see that in UK, but we see where people want to release killers and murderers. They want them to be released on the street. Uh, and so society, part of society, they are turning a blind eye to corruption. Uh, you know, uh, Things that are illegal in this country and are illegal in Australia, Canada, and UK. A lot of people are turning their heads and saying, no, let the criminals go. Let the criminals out on the street. I don't know if that's happening UK but it's happening in other countries, and especially our country too. That they want more amnesty for people who do corruption or crime. One side does more than the other, and the ideology of that I don't understand. Stephen, do you?
I think there is a question about how long you lock people up for. So I think that's a debate
Yeah,
that,
me too.
that,
I,
that
I, I
societies
yeah,
have. So if someone's done a murder, for example, should it automatically be, life without parole? Um, uh, Here in the UK, we have that. There are some of the worst murderers do get life, and life means life,
hmm
and that happens. But it's a minority of the murder cases. Most murder cases will get 20 years, something like that. Um, Before, well, you don't automatically get released after 20 years, but you have to do your 20 years before you can go for a parole board, and then
hmm
you might be released if you're considered to be no longer a threat to society. Your legal situation is that you are still legally a prisoner, if you like. You're released on license,
right.
so they can take you back to jail anytime they like.
Yeah,
Um,
probation. Yeah, probation, and you have to see your
it's
probationary officer. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly, and that's life.
yeah,
That's for life. If you've got a life sentence, so it's not kind of like and there are certain restrictions about what you can do out in society, like owning a gun or something like that. You wouldn't get a gun license, um, which kind of seems sensible if you're a murderer. Um,
yeah.
so there are those kind of things, but that's more or less what we have here. I guess it's probably not that different in the States, although I think you do lock people up more readily than we do
Yeah,
in the UK.
we have a lot of crime here in the U.S. and we have a lot of weapons crime. You guys have weapons crimes too. I mean, just because a person doesn't have a gun doesn't mean they can't find a weapon. That understanding to me is like, okay, a ball bat can be a weapon, a knife. It doesn't not necessarily be a gun, and that's how
Yeah,
people pro gun owners talk. They say, well, actually, the people that have there's more guns, there's less crime that people have a license or carry. Uh, we found that out too. But I know that's not set in stone, the percentages. But a lot of people would argue with me about that. But it's true. We have states that have real liberal gun laws. Not real liberal. They don't give convicts or anybody like that a gun. But it's the more states that have concealed carry or permits, you have to go through FBI background check and everything to get a gun license here in the States. So they do that. Uh, in closing, I guess an hour went pretty fast here. In closing, what do you think when you wrote your books about corruption? What was on your mind about how these ideas come to you, Stephen?
well, I think it's what motivated me to write was wanting to throw things at the TV, um, and
Yeah,
general anger,
yeah,
frustration. I
yeah,
think, well, how am I going to get this out of my system?
Yeah.
And how am I going to actually go through a process that enables me to think it through and actually come to a reasonable conclusion about it? And I found that actually writing does that. First of all, it does allow me to express my thoughts, and it does also force a thinking process, because to write a book, you've got to think it through.
Hmm.
And when I write a book about something, I like to cover it from all angles. So I don't want to just look at it from one particular perspective or
Right.
political attitude or whatever. I want to look at it all angles at it and have characters who have expressed all the different angles. So if we're talking about the politics, for example, I want to have liberals and conservatives and
In
religious
the
people and everything else in the mix, so that
right.
I can put each can put their own point of view in the book, and it shouldn't be apparent to the reader which is my point of view, if any
Yeah.
of them. What I'm doing is I'm observing what all these other people's points of view are, and then
Yeah. I'm like
writing about
you.
how writing out how they interact,
Yeah.
so that they can say, oh yeah, that's what's happening.
Yeah. I'm like you. I get tired of the news sometimes, and I don't watch it because it's, and then they repeat during the late hours. You go watch it at 9 o'clock, or you watch it at 6. They repeat the same stories, maybe with a different talking head, a different perspective, or whatever. Uh, Now, Stephen, would you, in closing, tell us where we can find your work and your books, and that sort, Stephen?
Okay, well, I've got a website, so Stephen Ford, or one word, .co.uk, and all my books are on there.
Okay, all right, and that's stephenford.com. You say? Okay,
.co.uk.
okay, I got it. Yeah, I'll put that in the narrative whenever I put it out, and I should be able to be putting that out soon. Uh, but I want to thank you all the way from the UK, uh, and talking to me. And I'm happy for Alba hooking me up with you. You seem like a very nice gentleman and very well thought out person. And your ideas actually kind of melt in with mine. I mean, with about how ideology goes and using the common sense approach and try to stay away from party, but stay with policy and common sense. What policies are going to be better for us as a society, as a citizen of certain countries, of all countries actually. Uh, how's that going to work out? If bad decisions are made, and if it's bitter politics, it gets nowhere. It's just one side don't listen to the other side, and we're not getting anywhere. And that's the way it's going all over the world. You mentioned that earlier, Stephen. So I guess that's where your thoughts were coming from when you wrote your books. Now the paranormal books, you wrote those, the first two in a paranormal sense. Uh, where did you get that from? Have you had any experiences yourself, Stephen, in the paranormal?
Um, Kind of. I kind of, you go out and you into the wilds, and you can imagine yourself in there with all the spirits
Hmm.
and that kind of thing. I can sort of feel myself in the same spiritual feelings about things that our ancient ancestors had. So that's where I came from. So have I got sort of ghosts and things like that? Well, I'm not sure. Is it real, or is it in my head? I wouldn't
Right.
know. Um, but um, but certainly I was interested in that spirit, the idea of spirits and how they'd work. So that's why I wrote Walking Out of This World.
Now, our soul's going to leave our body someday, and we're going to be ashes to ashes, dust to dust, and then our soul's going to go back to the divine in other dimensions, maybe parallel, in other dimensions that we're going to travel. And a lot of people say, well, when you die, you die. I said, no, you don't. You have a soul, and that soul is going somewhere. It's going back to the creator, to the divine, and it might be passing through some dimensions before you get there. Uh, I guess that's how you feel too. I mean, this is not a, I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about spiritual affairs of the body, Stephen.
Yeah, I don't come to a conclusion on that. I just sort of do a what if you like. My Walking Out of This World is kind of, what if there
Yeah,
were spirits?
yeah.
You know, what would they be like? How would they work?
Hmm.
And So just kind of exploring that angle, and you can believe in him or not believe in them, but it's your choice. But
Okay.
uh, I just thought it would be fun to write about it. I thought.
Yeah, that's great. Stephen Ford from the UK, thank you very much for being on the show. And this is Dave Emmons with A Strange Reality signing off, and hope you enjoy this conversation whenever I release it in a couple of days. And I'll put the narrative in there about your website and things of that nature, Stephen. Thank you very much, Stephen Ford, for being on the show. And Strange Reality, it's, I mean, even in politics and society today, it's a strange reality. It really is. All righty. Thank you, Stephen. Bye bye.